So my project was dealing with progressive era presidents and muckrakers. In this political cartoon, you'll see a picture of President Harding, who is considered one of the most corrupt presidents the country's ever seen. He's considered very corrupt because he implemented a high protective tariff and dismantled the last wartime controls over industry. His corruption primarily began as soon as he assumed the office of president. He ended up hiring many people who voted for him in the election as high powers in offices in the White House. By far his most corrupt act was in the form of the Teapot Dome scandal. This is when Harding's administration suffered a tremendous setback, when several officials conspired to lease government land in Wyoming to oil companies in exchange for cash. Not only did he make the mistake of all these corrupt acts, but he would always blame his friends who he appointed for making him make these mistakes. In August of 1923, Harding died and Calvin Coolidge took office. Coolidge modestly climbed the Republican ranks from city councilman to governor of Massachusetts. As president, he sought to remove scandal, but he also continued Harding's economic approach, which was refusing to take actions in defense of workers or consumers against American business. He's quoted, "The chief business of the American people is business." This political cartoon shows how Coolidge took over a lot of Harding's problems that were very hard to do away with, so he had to inherit them during his presidency, unfortunately for him. This political cartoon gives you a better idea of how many troubles Coolidge inherited from just Harding. The last of the three Republican presidents during this era was Herbert Hoover. In agreement with the former two Republican presidents, Hoover also focused on having a laissez-faire policy, which stressed that the government have minimal interference in business activities. At the same time, the United States enjoyed a 12-year spell of Republican presidents. Women made a large push for equality. One of their main goals was to get rid of alcohol in the form of a prohibition. They thought that this would lower domestic violence at home, since a lot of males at the time would come home from work and abuse their families because of alcohol. The political cartoon on the left shows that women were serious about having men act under the prohibition. The sign reads, "Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours," meaning that women will not marry, which was a big leap for them to own up to their independence against men, which was huge for them. Women's biggest leap came through the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, guaranteeing women the right to vote. The picture on the bottom shows a peaceful protest by women, which states, from President Wilson, that this is the time to support women's suffrage. This holds true since women were really coming into their stride as an equal person in society, and their contributions were great. My next section that I dealt with was muckrakers. Muckrakers was a term popularized by Theodore Roosevelt, and they were writers whose exposure of corruption in business and government aroused public opinion and helped spur progressive era reforms. The first strike was launched by Lincoln Stevens in 1902, but definitely the largest muckraker of all time was Ida Tarbell. 1 month after Lincoln Stevens launched his assault on urban politics, Tarbell began her McClure's series entitled History of the Standard Oil Company. Her findings outlined and documented the cutthroat business practices behind John Rockefeller's extreme rise. As you can see in the picture, Standard Oil Company is pictured as having control over mostly everything. So Ida Tarbell really got to the bottom of it and persecuted him. Even more of an effect than Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair was a muckraker who hoped to illustrate the horrible effects of capitalism on workers in the Chicago meatpacking industry. The Jungle, a book written by Upton Sinclair, highlighted workers sacrificing their fingers and nails by working with acid, losing limbs, catching diseases, and toiling long hours in cold, cramped conditions. He hoped the public feedback would cause mayhem and that reforms would soon follow. The video above is an excerpt from The Jungle. President Roosevelt, who coined the term muckraker, was ready to act upon the atrocities. Within months, Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act to alleviate these sickening conditions, all due in part to Upton Sinclair's The Jungle.